You're watching The Business of Law, brought to you by Bloomberg Law and the ABA Journal. I'm Elie Pacchia. For as long as I can remember, U.S. News has been the king of the law school rankings game, but now a new challenger has emerged. This time, it's Law Blog Above the Law. We're joined today by its editor, Elie Mystal, to take a look at the set of law school rankings. Welcome. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
I feel like Rocky now that we're talking about U.S. News.
Right on. You guys had a really interesting project here. Let's start off by taking a look at the methodology. You seem to focus mostly on what happens after law school, somewhat of a novel approach. Let's break it down here. We had 30% of a school score based on how many grads got full-time permanent jobs requiring a JD degree. That makes sense. 30% was also given to how many grads joined the nation's 250 largest firms or got federal clerkships. Again, given the survey's focus on jobs, I think that also makes a lot of sense. But then the number of Supreme Court clerks and federal judges that the school has produced combined to constitute 15% of the rankings. So not a lot of people get these jobs.
Right.
Why should the vast majority of prospective law students out there care how many Supreme Court clerks or federal judges come out of a school?
Right. Well, I think one of the things about that particular ranking methodology is that we are looking at prestige and we are looking at things that kind of elite law students want to do. So in a way, looking at Supreme Court clerks, looking at federal judges, it's almost like an elite control group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you really want to go to law school to kind of reach the highest levels of the profession, we want to have a spot in the rankings for that as well.
Right. Now, are we talking old-timey historical numbers? How many federal judges came out of Columbia Law School in the 1890s? Does that goose their rankings?
No, we're trying not to be that looking that far back in the past. We're really focused on the most recent numbers, the 2011 graduates and the current crop of federal judges.
Okay, so you have to be living.
Yes.
Right on.
And kind of, so you have to be someplace that we can actually count you right now. And, granted, and one of the, I think it's a fair point, it's a fair criticism in the rankings that we are kind of more elitist focused. If you want to go to law school to hang out a shingle and work for your dad and his community and whatever, we're probably not the ranking for you. Now, granted, one of the reasons why we're looking at it in this way is that we're kind of thinking about, well, what would motivate you in this market to put in $100,000 into legal education?
Right. So cost is an issue, and cost of schools amounts to 15% of your rankings. You said you use this as a stand-in for how much debt a student takes on, but since you didn't account for scholarships and loan forgiveness programs and rich parents, how good a measure can that be?
Yeah, I mean, I would love, the number that we wanted was the actual indebtedness of each graduating class from each graduating school.
I'm surprised it was hard to find that data.
Oh, the schools won't give it to us, right? I mean, they have it, they know. They won't share that information publicly. Maybe if we ask them very, very nicely next year, we can get a better handle on that. But the other thing I will say about cost versus scholarship versus financial aid packages, I think a lot of schools try to use the amount of financial aid they give as a way to suggest that their education costs less. But a lot of times those loans have to be paid back. A lot of times we're not talking about grants and scholarships. Sometimes we are, but a lot of times we're not. And then even if you take it in the rich parents aspect or people who are honestly paying out of their own pocket, that's still a significant investment. Daddy might be rich, but daddy still wants an ROI. And so we're kind of looking at this from a perspective of what law school is going to kind of give you the most bang for that extreme buck.
And finally, your survey looked at schools' alumni, how they felt about the school after attending. That's 10% of the rankings. How many alumni responses do you need before you have a valid data set?
Yeah, that's our. We need to have something proprietary, right? So that nobody can just copy us. I'm not the statistics guy, so I don't know exactly what the statistically significant whatever is. I know that we tried to get it to a statistically significant level based on the number of people in the graduating class. So if you have a graduating class of 100 people, it's not like just 10 people need to respond. And we only use surveys that we had a statistically significant amount of response. I don't know the exact number of that. I will point out that U.S. News basically uses 40% of their rankings as some kind of alumni survey-based factor, whether it's alumni or judges or what have you, and we're only using 10. So that is a bit of a difference.
Yeah, it doesn't sound, though, too dissimilar from the rate my professor problem that other law school rankings have run into.
I think it's completely different than the rate my professor.
It's self-reported. It's how do you feel about the institution and its anecdotal evidence from people that attended.
It's from people who attended the institution. But it's not like people have access to grind with their own with particular individuals.
just the institution, a body of individuals. So let's look at the top 16 schools. The order's changed, but it's pretty much the same names that we saw in the U.S. News list. What does it say when you have such a different methodology, but by and large, you ended up at the same result?
Well, I think at the very top, what it says is that prestige matters. And what it says is that the historically most prestigious universities are still the law schools that are putting the most people in the best jobs. And I think that's unsurprising. I think there would actually be something wrong, right, with the rankings if it was telling us an extremely different result than what our eyes and ears have come to expect. I think if you look beyond the top 15, beyond the top 20, though, you start to see some real variance between what we're doing with our outcome-based rankings versus a more input determinative thing like U.S. News.
Two schools that jumped out at me, Columbia and NYU. Columbia dropped from 4th on U.S. News ranking to 8. NYU dropped from 6 on U.S. News to 10th on yours. These are clearly schools that are among the large feeders for big law firms. What accounts for the drop?
Yeah, look,
is this where the big law crisis?
We're in New York. I basically can't have a drink around my office, which is very next to NYU. Is very close to NYU right now because people have been angry. What it shows is that in New York, the market most hit by the recession was New York. What NYU and Columbia did were feed big law firms in New York, and those are the firms that have cut back the most on hiring. So it's actually not that surprising that the big New York law schools that were feeders for big law took a bit of a hit because the big law firms in the city aren't hiring as much as they used to be. I think the statistic that our research director pointed out was something like 12% of big law jobs used to be in New York. Now it's like 8.5%.
Yeah.
So somebody has to kind of take the hit for that difference. And right now it's NYU and Columbia.
At the end of the day, the main purpose for a project like this is having influence among prospective law students. And one factor is the size of your blog's audience. I suspect you might be the biggest legal news website out there today. How many page views do you get a month?
I don't know about China.
Right. But that said, how many page views do you get a month, and how many are unique visitors?
Our uniques are very high. Our uniques are approaching 1 million, and that's really been a great thing for us.
Wow.
I mean, the way that I would put it like this. This is how I tell my mother as I try to explain to her why, it was a really good decision for me to leave my job at Devon Voice, right? We've got all the law students. Like, all of the law students currently in law school have heard of us. Whether or not they check us every day or every week or every month, they've heard of us. And so what we're trying to do with that as a base, right? What we're trying to do is say, like, you're already reading us, you're already here. Let's try to talk to you before you get to law school. Let's try to talk to you before you make this decision to go to law school, which one is going to be kind of best for you and what you want to do with your career.
Yeah. Another factor in unseating U.S. News is believability. U.S. News has a somber, even staid presence. Above the Law is a little bit snarky and not afraid to be offensive.
A little bit.
Does that work for or against you?
I think it totally works for us, right? For two reasons. One, again, our audience are younger people. And so that's who we're trying to reach. And I think that our style works very well for that. The second thing, and this is maybe more of a philosophical point, but I think increasingly the people who care about kind of mainstream media imprimatur of whatever are people who work in mainstream media, right? I mean, when I'm writing a post, when I'm trying to generate eyeballs, I'm thinking about how it's going to play on Facebook and Twitter. I'm thinking about how you're going to start a conversation on Reddit. So doing it kind of in an old school mainstream media way, I'm sure I understand why it works for some publications, but we're trying to go to where the readers are, and increasingly the young people are on the social media, all the various social media, and I think we write in a way that fits in more with that kind of style as opposed to, again, U.S. News.
Stepping back from this entire episode, everyone pretty much that we talked to agrees that there's just too many graduates, not enough jobs out there in law, and students are taking on too much debt. Where do you think we're going to be in 2 years? Are these problems going to get better over time, or do you see it getting worse or staying the same?
I think we're in the plateau, the trough, really. So certainly for the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think we're going to continue to see this. I think looking very far out, maybe 10 years far out, maybe 15 years far out, I do think that what we're going to have is basically 2 tiers of law school, and thus 2 tiers of law graduate. You're going to have one that are basically kind of never going to make partner, going to do a lot of the manual labor law work, and that's going to be fine. We need people like that, and they will make kind of a stable middle class living, maybe not in the major markets, whatever. And then we'll have this other tier of kind of your kind of traditional 3 years of law school, partner track, associate position that law schools are pumping out. So I really think that we're going to have to bifurcate the market a little bit. I mean, some will argue that we have to split up in 3 and 4 and 5 ways. But I think at the very least in the next 10 years, we'll see 2 different tracks of law student, because it just costs too much right now to train everybody to be the next Supreme Court justice.
Right, and finding the pricing method for that lower track is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah,
for,
well, that's
for
where the game
academia.
is. That's where the game is, and it's going to be, which law school wants to be the first one to say we're not training the Supreme Court justices of the future, we're not training the partners of the future. Who wants to be the first law school to say that? That's why I say
easier said than done.
Maybe a decade from now, some new school will be willing to kind of tell that truth.
Elie, interesting project. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. It's Elie Mystal, editor at Above the Law. If you'd like to learn more about the cases and issues we just discussed, be sure to go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. You can see more of our videos on YouTube, and you can see our updates on Twitter. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.